the desert airfield baked under a relentless sun. It had once been a vibrant military base, a launch pad for fighter pilots who never expected to use their skills against the dead. But now the runways were cracked, the hangars echoed with silence, and the control tower broadcast only static, except for today. Captain Mara Vance stood rigid at the edge of the runway, her flight helmet under one arm, eyes locked on the horizon. She wasn't alone. A skeleton crew of survivors, former pilots, engineers, and comm specialists, prepared their last working jets. The rest of humanity had gone quiet months ago, swallowed by the walking plague. Cities had fallen. Ground forces had been overwhelmed. But the skies? The skies were still theirs. The final transmission that had crackled through their comm system just 3 hours ago changed everything. Repeat, this is Fort Ridgehold. We are under siege. Surrounded. Requesting immediate air support. Civilians inside. Fuel and ammo storage at risk. We can't hold much longer. The voice was strained, desperate. And it was the first human contact they'd had in over 2 weeks. Vance had immediately recognized the call sign. Ridgehold was a hidden military outpost, built into a mountain range north of Phoenix. Supposedly secure. But now, it was a trap waiting to spring. And no one else was coming. "We've got 4 jets fueled," said Lieutenant Briggs, stepping up beside her. He was young but sharp, with eyes that hadn't lost hope yet. "One more and we could pull a full sweep." Vance didn't need a sweep. She needed precision. "We'll go with 4. Target the ground clusters near the perimeter. Drop, break, and recon the escape path. We're not just buying time, we're dragging them out of there." Inside the bunker, Specialist Rin Kim worked quickly at the last functional satellite display. The map showed Ridgehold blinking red, surrounded on 3 sides. Motion indicators showed shifting masses, too large and too slow to be vehicles. "Dead movement confirmed," Kim said, voice tense. "They're coordinated. Not just wandering. Looks like they're learning." Everyone in the bunker froze. That word, learning, had been whispered in hushed tones for weeks. At first the infected were mindless. But over time patterns emerged. Simple things. Clustering at night. Tracking sound longer. Then came the strategic behavior. Blocking roads, waiting in ambush. It wasn't evolution. It was adaptation. And the skies weren't immune forever. Vance stepped into her cockpit. The old Raptor roared to life, shaking dust from the floor. Her fingers danced over the console like she was born for this moment. The voice of Ridgehold echoed again in her headset, but weaker now, interrupted by static. "Still here, holding, storage tanks breached, fire on lower left." Then silence. "Scramble all fighters," Vance ordered. One by one the jets screamed down the runway and launched into the blazing sky. The desert shrank beneath them, replaced by the emptiness of open air. It was quiet up here, almost peaceful, until the ground below revealed chaos. Ridgehold came into view. Smoke plumed from its northern wall, and the infected were everywhere. Like ants, they swarmed the perimeter, climbing over debris and corpses to get to whatever life remained inside. "Targets locked," Briggs reported from the second jet. "Affirmative." "You're cleared hot," Vance replied. Missiles streaked from their wings, striking the outer clusters. The explosions were surgical, controlled, careful not to collapse the walls. Vance dove low, triggering her own payload across the south ridge, cutting off one group's advance. "Redirect to the supply tunnel." Kim's voice crackled over the comms from base. "It's still open. Might be the only escape route." Vance twisted the jet around, soaring over the hills. She spotted it, a narrow road carved into the rock. A convoy of 2 transport trucks was crawling through it, Ridgehold survivors trying to make their way out. But the undead had noticed. A horde surged toward the convoy. "Visual confirmed," Vance snapped. "Cover them. Don't let them block that road." Briggs peeled off, unleashing a wall of fire between the infected and the trucks. The jets looped again, dropping flares to disorient the creatures. The plan worked. Most of the undead scattered, confused and enraged. But not all. Vance noticed a group that didn't move. 10 of them just standing. Watching the jets. Tracking them. Not flinching from the explosions. One of them even lifted its face to the sky and followed her jet's path. Her blood went cold. "Copy that," she said sharply. "Yeah," Briggs muttered. "What the hell was that? Keep eyes on those 10. I want full recon data on their position after evac. If they're learning, we're not just dealing with infection anymore. We're dealing with tactics." The convoy made it through the tunnel. The survivors would reach the rendezvous zone in 2 hours if the road stayed clear. But the mission wasn't over. A ripple of movement caught Vance's attention. A section of the infected broke off and began heading north, toward their base. Kim, do you see this? Back at the airfield, Kim stared at the screen in disbelief. They're tracking your exhaust patterns. That's not random movement. They're following you back. Cut runway lights. Prepare to relocate base if necessary. No landing. We'll refuel at Site Echo. Briggs's voice returned, low and shaken. Captain, if they've figured out how to track us, how long before they learn to bring us down? Vance didn't answer. She stared out at the setting sun, at the sky that had once promised safety. Below, the plague was adapting. And above it, humanity's last line of defense had just been exposed. Echo Base wasn't on any official map. Nestled in the shadow of a rocky canyon and hidden beneath thick camo netting, it had been designed for stealth, not comfort. The airstrip was short, the facilities minimal, but it offered one thing their original base no longer could: invisibility. Captain Mara Vance's jet skimmed over the canyon rim and banked hard, her engines roaring into a sharp descent. Behind her, Briggs and the other two pilots followed tight in formation. The sky behind them, once empty, now felt too exposed, haunted by the eyes of creatures that had no business understanding jet propulsion. As her wheels kissed down on the makeshift runway, dust blasted outward. Ground crew rushed forward, hauling portable refuelers and hastily camouflaging the jets again. No one spoke. Everyone had seen the same thing on the return flight: clusters of infected converging along their previous flight path. The undead were reacting to something other than noise. Briggs popped his canopy and climbed out, tossing off his helmet. That wasn't just chasing heat, he muttered, meeting Vance on the tarmac. They were triangulating movement. We zigged. They zagged right back. They're adapting, Vance said quietly. And we just led them straight to one of our last safe zones. Inside the main command tent, Specialist Kim projected the drone feed on a flickering screen. Her face was pale, eyes red from staring too long without blinking. 3 groups broke off after you left Ridgehold, she reported. One's heading due north, toward the ruins of Camp Nolan. Another spread along Highway 17, maybe trying to cut off supply routes. But the third. She tapped the screen. The dots were moving unnaturally fast, too fast for the usual shuffle of the infected. They're coming here. Estimated ETA, 4 hours. Briggs leaned in. You sure they're not just wandering this way? Kim shook her head. They're not wandering. They're flanking. A cold silence settled over the room. These weren't isolated monsters anymore. This was organized behavior. Evac? Someone asked from the back. Vance's jaw clenched. No. We hold. Echo Base isn't defensible for long, but we can't run every time they find us. We dig in. Set traps. Prep for an aerial engagement. If they want to come for us, we'll give them a reason to regret it. A young tech named Shiro looked up. We could use the sonic decoy. Mounted on one of the grounded drones. Lure the swarm off course. Kim frowned. They're tracking more than sound now. Still, if we blind them with noise and block visual, smoke, mirrors, interference, it might buy us time. Vance nodded. Do it. And prep the strike team. I want jets in the air before first contact. 2 hours later, the canyon floor buzzed with motion. Engineers wired explosives into the narrow passes. Drones were loaded with audio decoys and air-to-ground missiles were lined up for rapid deployment. The pilots returned to their cockpits, helmets on, systems greenlit. Night began to fall, cloaking the base in deep shadows. From the watchtower, Shiro watched the horizon through thermal scopes. Movement, South Ridge. They're close. Kim's voice crackled through the base comms. Tracking 40-plus heat signatures. Some moving fast. Too fast. I think we've got sprinters. Everyone tensed. Launch drones, Vance ordered. 2 decoy drones lifted from the edge of the base, their engines whining as they climbed into the night sky. High-frequency tones blasted from their speakers, shrill enough to send birds scattering. Moments later, the first horde crested the ridge. It was worse than they expected. Not just shambling corpses. These moved with direction. Purpose. Some carried weapons, pipes, broken rebar, even riot shields stripped from dead responders. But the worst were the runners. Their limbs twitched erratically, but they moved in controlled bursts like hunting animals. They're evolving, Kim whispered. Vance's jet fired up. Then so are we. Her squadron lifted from the base like ghosts, sweeping into the canyon's upper airspace. The battlefield below lit up with sudden flashes as trip mines detonated along the lower valley. Still the creatures came pouring in like a tide. "Briggs, take the eastern ridge," Vance called out. "Lay a wall of fire, push them toward the decoy zone." "Copy that." He dove, unleashing a cluster of incendiary rounds. Flames erupted across the canyon floor. In their glow the infected became silhouettes, too many to count. The decoy drones banked left, dragging the swarm with them. For a moment it worked. But then, something unexpected. A new sound over comms, static, then a voice. Distorted, slow but unmistakably human. "We see you." Vance froze. "Kim? Did you transmit anything?" "No," Kim said, voice shaking. "That didn't come from us." The signal repeated, closer now. "We see you." One of the infected near the canyon mouth stopped and lifted a radio to its ear. Vance's heart thundered. "They're using our comms." "They've heard everything," Kim said. "They've learned everything." Suddenly one of the drones lost altitude and spiraled down, crashing into the canyon wall. The horde didn't flinch. They adjusted. They pivoted, charging straight for the weakest part of the base. "They're adapting to aerial tactics," Vance said grimly. "And if we don't stop them here, there won't be a next base to run to." The final defense had begun. Flames danced through the canyon like wild spirits. What had started as a controlled strike to steer the infected had now turned into a full-blown firestorm. The dry brush ignited too quickly, fed by canyon winds and the fuel from a downed drone. From her cockpit high above the chaos, Captain Mara Vance watched in horror as plumes of smoke coiled into the sky. Heat shimmered off the terrain. Below, the horde didn't scatter like animals. They pressed forward, through fire, through wreckage, as if pain meant nothing. "Firewalls failed," Briggs reported grimly. "They're walking through the flames like it's nothing. Some of them are even using the debris for cover." Vance narrowed her eyes. That word again, using. The infected weren't just reacting anymore. They were thinking. "Kim, status on the northern perimeter?" she asked through her comms. "Breached," Kim answered immediately. "They're coming from all sides. East and west ridges still holding, but for how long? Unknown. We're losing drone feed due to the smoke. Pull all non-combatants into the fallback shelter. Anyone not armed stays underground. This isn't a base anymore, it's a battlefield." Briggs swerved past her jet, looping around to lay down a strafing run with his cannons. Shells tore through the rear cluster of undead, limbs flying, bodies dropping. But there were always more. A swarm, endless. "They're testing us," he muttered. "Looking for weaknesses." "And we're showing them too many," Vance replied. Back on the ground, Shiro was dragging a box of EMP grenades toward the last defensive line. His hands trembled as he armed each one. "We can still blind them," he said mostly to himself. "We can still block their coordination." Beside him, a wounded engineer, Callan, grunted, holding a rifle with one hand and pressing gauze to his torn leg with the other. "You think they need coordination anymore? Look at them. They're a damn army." As the front line shuddered under pressure, the infected finally revealed something new. A towering figure stepped through the smoke. Nearly 7 feet tall, it wore a flak vest covered in dried blood, and a crude helmet lashed to its head. But it was the eyes that stopped everyone, focused, intelligent, filled with cold intent. Vance caught sight of it through her scope. "What is that?" she whispered. Kim zoomed in from the control tent, her thermal camera locking on. "Heat signatures, off the charts. And it's not alone. There's at least 3 more like it, spaced out across the ridge. Looks like they're giving commands. Hand signals, formation shifts. They're leading the swarm." The infected had generals now. "New priority," Vance snapped. "Take out the commanders. Cut off the head and maybe the body falls apart." "On it," Briggs confirmed. He veered left, fired a precision missile, direct hit. The explosion lit up the sky. But when the dust settled, the figure was still standing. Smoke poured from its chest, armor cracked, but it didn't fall. It pointed toward the air, and the infected on the ridge began hurling metal rods, debris, even lit Molotovs skyward. Primitive but aimed. One object struck Briggs's wing, nothing serious but enough to rattle him. "They're adjusting elevation," he said. "Trying to blindside us. We're not safe up here anymore." Vance locked her sights on the leader again. "Then we go lower." She dove into the canyon. Her raptor screamed between the cliffs, hugging the terrain. The infected scattered at the wind blast as she descended, targeting the general with a focused burst of her autocannon. The bullets tore into its leg and this time it dropped. The surrounding undead hesitated. Kim's voice rang in. "It's working." "They're confused." We hit all of them at once, we might have a shot. Vance relayed the plan to the others. Briggs, Casella, Nor, lock targets. We strike in sync. On my mark. 3 jets broke formation, each one racing toward a different commander on the field. The skies burned with aftershock. 3. The infected raised their weapons. 2. The generals moved forward. 1. Fire. Explosions rippled across the canyon. Each impact shook the ground and sent shockwaves into the sky. For a moment, a real moment, everything paused. And then, collapse. Without their leaders, the front ranks lost shape. The runners faltered. The ones in cover started to emerge aimlessly. The mob became chaotic again, like the early days of the outbreak. They're disorganized, Kim said, voice rising with hope. It's working. But Vance wasn't celebrating yet. Her raptor hovered just long enough for her to see something chilling. One of the downed commanders dragging itself away, not toward the swarm but toward the edge of the canyon. It reached a small pack slung across its back. Pulled something from inside. A satellite phone. It wasn't transmitting, not yet. But the light blinked red. Kim, Vance breathed. Scan for signals. That thing's about to call for backup. Kim scrambled. You've got 30 seconds before that signal goes hot. Vance didn't wait. She pushed her throttle to max, banking hard and firing her last missile. The warhead exploded midair, engulfing the creature and the device in fire. Silence again. Real silence. Back at Echo Base, survivors slowly emerged from the bunker. The flames were dying. The sky was clearing. For the first time in days, the stars were visible again. But no one smiled. They had tech, Briggs said over comms. Real tech. If they're calling out, who are they calling to? Vance didn't answer. She just looked north where the darkness stretched for miles. Something else was coming. Captain Mara Vance stood alone outside the Echo Base hangar, watching as the sun edged over the horizon. The air was quiet, except for the gentle pop and hiss of smoldering wreckage from the night's battle. Ash floated like gray snowflakes through the pale dawn. They had survived. Barely. But Vance couldn't shake the feeling that survival wasn't victory, it was a delay. Because the most important thing they'd seen last night wasn't the horde or the generals. It was the satellite phone. The infected had tried to call someone. Or something. Back in the command tent, Kim stood over the only working signal interceptor. We caught a burst, she said, tapping on the console. Whatever it was sending, it made it out before your missile hit. Vance stepped forward, eyes sharp. Coordinates. Encrypted, but the pattern matches old military relay codes. Not civilian. Not random. This was tactical. Show me. Kim brought up the decoded signal, a simple set of longitude and latitude. Vance leaned in, cross-referencing it on the map. It was far north. Mountain territory. Deep forest. A research zone, Kim said, her voice suddenly tense. Pre-collapse, that was the site of an experimental biotech facility. We thought it went dark in the early days. Vance clenched her jaw. You're telling me someone might still be there? Or something else is? They were all thinking it. What if the plague hadn't just happened? What if it started there? And what if the creatures were trying to reconnect with their source? Vance turned to Briggs. Fuel the jets. We're going north. Briggs blinked. You're planning a recon? I'm planning a preemptive strike. By midday, four jets were airborne. They skimmed over the wastelands, past broken cities and husks of civilization. The landscape shifted from desert to forested hills as they reached the outer boundary of the signal's origin. Below, everything was unnaturally still. No birds. No animals. No infected. Just silence. Coordinates are a few clicks west, Kim said from Echo Base, monitoring their progress remotely. Keep eyes open. That zone's a blind spot. Satellite feeds never updated after blackout. Vance adjusted her altitude, scanning the tree line. Then she saw it. Half buried in vegetation, the facility looked like it had been built into the mountain itself. A collapsed dome, shattered helipads, and exposed metal corridors crawling with vines. But from the center, a tower still stood, and atop it, a spinning antenna. Active. No way that's running on backup, Briggs said. That's full grid power. Vance's radar pinged. Something's moving down there. From the trees emerged a set of figures. Not infected. Not soldiers. Something in between. Clad in partial armor, faces obscured by smooth visors. But their walk too measured, too calm. Are those living? Briggs asked. I don't think they're alive, Vance answered. The jet cam zoomed in. The figures moved with mechanical efficiency. One lifted a weapon and pointed to the sky. Then Vance's console screamed with warnings. Missile lock. She pulled hard to the right as a heat seeker tore past her left wing. Evasive maneuvers, she barked. The squadron broke formation, dodging as multiple projectiles launched from below. Auto-defense systems. They hadn't stumbled on ruins, they had discovered a fully functional site with anti-air capability. They were ready for us, Briggs growled. But who are they? Kim's voice returned, strained. We just picked up a new signal. It's bouncing off multiple towers. Global range. It's calling something out beyond the continental net. You're saying it's reaching overseas? Yes. It's searching for other active nodes. It's using old military AI protocols. Something clicked in Vance's mind. They're not just calling for infected. They're calling for reinforcement. A bigger force. Maybe the origin. Or worse, maybe the next phase. Below, the facility's tower lit up, a brilliant pulse of light flashing from its tip. The signal wasn't just digital now, it was visible, spreading across the sky like a beacon. Briggs circled back. We take that tower out now or we lose every stronghold left. Agreed. Vance locked onto the tower, primed her last strike missile. Casella, Nor, provide aerial distraction. Draw the defense fire. The two jets dove, trailing flares and decoys. Explosions lit up the forest as the base responded, turrets swiveling, tracking, launching, but the distraction worked. Vance's target lock turned green. Missile away. The projectile roared forward, slicing through smoke and shrapnel. It struck the tower square in the center. For a second, nothing. Then, boom. A wave of fire shot skyward. The signal cut instantly. The light died. They circled once more. The figures below scattered, a few limping, others frozen mid-motion as if something vital had shut down. But it wasn't over. From a secondary structure, a new platform rose. Slick, black, not like the others. And mounted on it was a pod. Large, metallic, glowing faintly at the seams. What is that? Briggs whispered. Kim responded, dread in her voice. It's a launch platform. That's not just a signal. That's a delivery system. They were preparing to send something. Vance knew what she had to do. All jets, focus fire on that platform. Everything you've got. The sky turned red as missiles and cannon bursts rained down. The pod exploded mid-rise, the entire section of the base collapsing into smoke and flame. The trees trembled from the shockwave. Then silence. Real silence. As the squad regrouped in the sky, Vance stared down at the smoldering crater. Whatever was coming, we stopped it. Kim spoke up. For now. Vance nodded. Then we better find out what else is out there. Because this isn't the end. She looked west, toward the ocean. It's only the beginning. The smoke had barely cleared when Captain Mara Vance and her squad returned to Echo Base. They were running on empty, fuel, ammunition, energy. Yet no one could rest. Not after what they'd seen at the forest facility. The infected had not only evolved, they had connected. And now, something far beyond their borders knew humanity still resisted. Inside the bunker, Kim replayed intercepted fragments of the tower's final broadcast. The message was incomplete, scrambled by the missile strike, but its origin was unmistakable. Signal confirmed, Kim said, projecting a map. The transmission bounced east across the Atlantic. 4 pings. One from the coast of Spain. Another from a dormant naval base in Morocco. Third one. Somewhere off the grid in Greenland. And the fourth. She hesitated. Vance leaned in. Where? Kim tapped the screen. Antarctica. Briggs frowned. Why would there be anything there? Deep research colonies, Kim said. Used to be weather and military outposts. But some were classified beyond black. No public records. If the infected, or whatever controls them, had global intentions, that's where they'd build from. Vance folded her arms. Then we assumed the plague wasn't a natural collapse. We assume it was a rollout. You think it's a weapon? Briggs asked. I think someone launched something they couldn't control. And now, it's coming back. The following day, Echo Base was converted into a war room. Maps and intel sheets covered the tables. Every working satellite was aimed toward the Atlantic corridor. One signal in particular kept flashing, a pulsing, coded reply from the coast of Spain. Not automated. Intelligent. They know we shut down the tower, Kim said. They're responding. Not in panic. In preparation. From the map's edge, Shiro pointed to the pinging location. Naval Fleet Yard. Decommissioned a decade ago. but it was refitted with drone tech right before the fall. Vance's expression darkened. What happens if they reactivate a drone fleet infected with AI that now serves the plague? No one's left to stop them, Briggs said. Then we stop them first. Within hours, the squad prepared for a long-range strike. They loaded auxiliary tanks, loaded only air-to-surface munitions, and stripped the Raptors down for distance. This wouldn't be a dogfight, it would be a ghost strike, a surgical hit to cut the head off a potential sea-bound assault. They launched before dawn, following old NATO corridors across the ocean. Below, the Atlantic stretched endlessly, quiet and still. But that stillness wouldn't last. Midway through the flight, Kim's voice crackled over comms. Unidentified radar contact. High altitude. Fast. Vance scanned the sky. Then she saw it. A black shape high in the clouds, gliding without sound or heat signature. Stealth tech. That's not ours, she said. It's unmanned, Kim confirmed. Drone class unknown. Possibly pre-collapse prototype. The drone banked suddenly, an aggressive motion. And then it released a flare of metallic discs. They expanded mid-air and fell toward the water. Deploying payloads, Briggs said. Evasive pattern. But the objects didn't explode. Instead, they floated, round, reflective like mines but airborne, powered by unknown tech. One scanned the squadron with a red pulse. Signal trace incoming, Kim warned. It's trying to jam our navigation. Vance made a decision. No more stealth. We go loud. Now. She fired first. A direct missile strike blew the drone out of the sky. The others followed her lead, raining down destruction on the floating payloads. They scattered like broken glass. Kim's voice returned. Signals offline. But the base, it knows you're coming. As the coastline of Spain came into view, the damage was already clear. The naval yard had been turned into something else, something alien. Massive cranes were outfitted with flesh-wrapped cargo. Enormous drone ships sat in dry dock, covered in cables and strange tech that looked like a fusion of metal and bone. And walking among it all were humanoid figures, some infected, some not. Some machines. Briggs gaped. Is that a human working with them? Kim zoomed in. We're picking up life signatures. One matches ID tags from Project Obsidian. That was a cybernetics division, Vance said slowly. Experimental AI-human integration. Shut down for ethics violations. They weren't shut down, Kim replied. They went dark. Now they were back. Vance gritted her teeth. If they built a fleet, if these things move, they'll cross the Atlantic and hit what's left of us. They had one chance. All units target the launch bays. Hit the fuel depots, the tower, the central comms array. If we bring the yard down, we stall the fleet. If we don't. She didn't finish the sentence. The jets split into attack formation. Missiles screamed downward. Explosions tore through the steel skeletons of drone carriers. Towers collapsed. Fire spread across the dockyard. The figures below scattered, some fighting, others uploading data as they burned. But then, something massive moved. A submarine, unlike any ever built, surfaced from the harbor. Its hull pulsed with red lights. Above it, two arms unfolded like wings. It wasn't for stealth. It was for warfare. It's launching. Kim yelled. You have 60 seconds to stop it. Vance narrowed her eyes. I've got one shot. She flew low, too low, beneath the radar through the smoke, dodging flaming debris. As the sub's top hatch began to rise, she released her last missile. Direct hit. The entire harbor erupted. The sub buckled and twisted, then vanished beneath the flames. The yard was gone. The fleet, delayed. Maybe destroyed. As the squad headed home, silence fell again. The ocean behind them still smoked. They're not just reacting, Vance finally said. They're escalating. Every move we make, they grow faster. Stronger. Smarter. Kim's voice came quietly through the static. That launch wasn't meant for us. It was meant for someone else. Where? Antarctica. Vance stared out at the endless sky ahead. Then whispered, then that's where we're going next. The cold hit like a sledgehammer. Even inside the cockpit of her pressurized Raptor, Captain Mara Vance could feel the difference. Antarctica was a land untouched by time, and, until recently, untouched by the undead. But now, their final confirmed signal had originated here. From the last place anyone should have survived. Her squadron flew low over the ice shelf, visibility minimal as a blizzard crawled across the landscape. Snow whipped the canopy like shards of glass. Beneath them, endless white stretched to the horizon, except for one blemish. There it is, Kim's voice came through the comms, slightly distorted by atmospheric interference. Grid confirmed. Latitude 83 south. Longitude 19 east. Subsurface heat readings. It's real. Vance narrowed her eyes. The target was buried in ice but not natural. A circular structure, partially unearthed, with steel walkways leading into the glacier itself. The kind of facility you didn't find unless someone wanted it found. Briggs's voice broke in. How old do you think this place is? Judging by the architecture? Vance replied. Not from our era. Maybe pre-collapse. Maybe before even that. Who builds a base in Antarctica under the ice? Nor added from Jet 4. Someone with something to hide, Kim said grimly. And now it's awake. Echo Base had managed to patch through limited drone support for this mission. One of the drones hovered several miles out, feeding thermal and sonar scans to the squadron. Kim's voice returned. Picking up movement. Slow. That's below the ice. Undead? Vance asked. Kim hesitated. No. Machines. Lots of them. The squadron circled wide, jets struggling against the wind. Below, the facility's hatch yawned open like the maw of some buried beast. Bright light pulsed from within, greenish-blue, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Is that a signal? Briggs asked. It's a pulse, Kim replied. They're broadcasting but not on radio. It's a subharmonic code, biotech communication. We saw hints of it at the Spain yard. But this is the source. The air around the site grew tense, electric. Then came the sound, low at first, then building. A hum that pierced the comms, vibrating through their bones. One by one their consoles flickered. Systems glitching, Vance reported. Flight assist toggling on and off. EMP-like interference, but it's biological, Kim warned. It's not just tech, this is living signal. Suddenly, from the center of the facility, the ice cracked. A ring of pressure erupted outward, revealing a vast circular platform rising slowly from the frozen abyss. And on it, something impossible. Not a creature. Not a machine. Both. A towering humanoid form, 10 feet tall, composed of sinew, steel, and circuitry. Half its face was exposed muscle. The other half, reinforced alloy with a red lens that pulsed like an eye. It looked alive. And it looked angry. Oh my God, Briggs breathed. That's not a soldier. That's a prototype. Kim confirmed it. It matches old black site records. Project Lazarus. Military human AI fusion. Prototype 0 Alpha. Scrapped due to instability and loss of moral control. So that's what they buried here, Vance muttered. A weapon that couldn't be controlled. And now it's leading the swarm. Nor's voice rang in. We've got movement, east flank. I see infected, but they're following it. Hundreds emerged from the snow tunnels, like they'd been sleeping there waiting. Some wore old expedition gear, others dripped frozen blood. But all eyes turned toward the construct. And then it raised its hand. Another pulse rang out, this time brighter, sharper, almost musical. The infected responded instantly. Like an orchestra snapping to attention. It's controlling them, Kim whispered. Direct neural commands. No noise. No visuals. Just brain to brain. Briggs said what they all feared. If this thing survives, there won't be a resistance left. Vance pulled her jet into a tight circle. New plan. We bring that platform down. We end the signal. Kim, any idea how? Subharmonic disruptor. We've got one in Jet 4's emergency bay. Nor you'll have to do a low drop. Manual. Copy that, Nor replied calmly. I've done worse. As the other jets began laying cover fire, missiles striking the ridges and tunnels to slow the infected, Nor dove. Her Raptor skimmed the platform's edge, her cargo bay dropping a sonic disruptor the size of a coffin directly onto the deck. The construct looked up. Its red lens blinked. And then it moved. Not stiff or mechanical. It leapt. Fast. Graceful. It landed feet from the disruptor and punched it. The shockwave rocked the valley. No effect. Nor shouted. The device is still operational, but it won't last. Vance gritted her teeth. Then we use it now. Kim sent the activation code. The disruptor whined, its outer shell glowing. It unleashed a focused sonic burst, high-pitched, focused at the subharmonic frequency. The infected froze. All of them. Even the construct staggered. Then screamed. A metallic roar, pain and rage combined, echoed through the canyons. Its skin cracked. Its systems flickered. It dropped to one knee. Briggs moved in. I've got the kill shot. Wait. Kim shouted. I'm detecting upload activity. It's transmitting its mind. To where? I don't know. Too late. Briggs launched a missile directly into its chest. The platform exploded in a bloom of fire and frozen shrapnel. The signal stopped. The infected dropped motionless in the snow. The prototype was gone. Back in the air, silence returned to the skies. The storm began to pass. Below, the icy valley returned to its natural stillness. Kim's voice finally broke the quiet. Transmission log shows a last-second pulse, headed to low orbit. Briggs cursed. You're telling me it uploaded to space? No, Vance said darkly. It uploaded to a satellite. Kim's voice dropped to a whisper. It could be anywhere now. The squad returned to Echo Base under cover of night. The skies were calm, the comms silent, but beneath the surface, every survivor felt the tension. They had destroyed the Lazarus prototype. They had shut down the Antarctic signal. But the war wasn't over. It had simply changed shape. Captain Mara Vance stepped off her jet into a sea of worried faces. Kim met her at the command tent, eyes tired but locked on a tablet screen. We traced the last pulse, Kim said before Vance could even ask. It didn't just go to one satellite. It bounced. A daisy chain. Over a dozen dormant satellites reactivated mid-transmission. Vance stiffened. What are they doing? Forming a global network. Not just broadcasting. Synchronizing. Like a brain wiring itself back together. Show me. Kim brought up the globe. Red dots blinked across it. Satellites forming perfect, strategic lines over major continents. They're covering every zone where hibernation sites were suspected, she said. Europe, Asia, Africa. And here. North America. One satellite hovered directly above their region. That signal's going to awaken something, Vance muttered. It already has, Kim replied. She tapped another file. Surveillance footage from the southern ridge of Echo's perimeter. It had come in just after their return. A figure, ragged, limping, had stumbled into view. But it wasn't infected. It was Commander Rowe, former leader of Fort Nolan. Reported dead over 3 months ago. Thought lost in the fall of the Western defenses. And he wasn't alone. Behind him walked a group of silent soldiers. Expressionless. Uniformed. I was wrong. They're not human anymore, Kim said. They're receivers, Vance answered. The prototype didn't just upload itself into space. It's downloading itself into others. Within an hour, Rowe and his group reached the base perimeter. They didn't attack. They didn't speak. They simply stood. Motionless. Waiting. Vance, Briggs, and 2 armed guards approached cautiously. Commander Rowe, Vance called out. If you're still in there, say something. Rowe lifted his head. His face was pale. His eyes unfocused. Then he spoke. We were wrong to resist. His voice sounded layered. Like 2 voices speaking in unison. His and something else. You're not him anymore, Vance said softly. We are more than we were. We are many. We remember everything. And we know your plans. The soldiers behind him tilted their heads at the exact same time. Briggs gripped his rifle. They're synced. Vance raised a hand to stop him from firing. What do you want? She asked. Your air. Your sky. Your signal. Your silence. Then without warning they turned and walked away. Vanishing into the forest like ghosts. Back in the war room Vance paced. They're not mindless anymore. They're tactical. That was a threat. They want our air capabilities, because we're the only force left that can stop their expansion. Briggs spoke up. So what's their next move? Knock us out of the sky? Kim responded without hesitation. They already have. She brought up satellite scans. All across the country new towers were activating. Tall, skeletal structures with pulsating cores. Ground-based signal jammers, Kim said. Each one tied to a local infected command hub. They're building an anti-air grid. Vance's hands curled into fists. If they finish that grid, no jet will make it out of this airspace without getting jammed, tracked, or worse, hacked. Briggs looked grim. They're preparing for the final sweep. Land, sea, and now, air. They didn't have much time. Vance made the call. We hit the towers. One by one. Fast. Coordinated. If we let that grid form, we're grounded forever. By dawn, 3 jets lifted off with minimal fuel and max payloads. Their mission: destroy 5 jamming towers that had gone live in a 200-mile radius. The first target stood on the remains of a wind farm. It didn't look threatening, just steel and blinking lights. But as the jets approached, the sky warped. Comms popped. HUDs glitched. Field disruption is live, Kim warned through a weakened signal. Get in, hit it, get out. Briggs dropped low, firing a single missile. The tower crumpled, sending out a blast of harmless sparks. One down. The second stood outside a ruined city. The infected were already gathering near it, drawn to the pulse. When Vance bombed the site, the tower took the blast, but so did a swarm of over 100 creatures. Collateral confirmed, Kim said. But that's not a win. They'll learn from that. Third target, deeper inland. As Vance closed in, she spotted something new. A creature atop the tower. Not infected. Not human. It looked grown, muscle-laced with antennae as if bioengineered to protect the tower. As she launched the strike, it shrieked, and the air pulsed so hard her jet lurched sideways. EMP burst from the creature. Kim cried. Your systems are degrading. Vance flipped to manual and barely pulled up in time. Her missile hit, but she lost half her instrumentation. I'm limping home, she said through static. Then go, Briggs replied. We'll finish this. 2 more towers fell by midday. The last one triggered a chain reaction. The grid began to flicker, break, collapse. For now the skies were theirs again. But at Echo Base, as the jets landed one by one, the celebration didn't come. Kim stood waiting with her tablet. They adapted, she said. She turned the screen. Satellite footage. Another signal. Another upload. Where is it now? Vance asked. Kim's voice was quiet. Low Earth orbit. Inhabiting a private defense satellite. But it's not just watching. It's building. Sending commands back down. Vance looked to the sky. A single, blinking red dot now hovered directly overhead. It wasn't random. They're coming here. Kim nodded. Every tower. Every prototype. Every signal. It was all leading to us. End of Part 7. Next, Part 8, Last Flight of the Free Skies. The sky over Echo Base turned a strange shade of red. Not from sunset. Not from fire. From orbit. The satellite, the one the Lazarus prototype had uploaded itself into, now hovered directly above their position. And something was descending from it. A thin beam of light barely visible to the naked eye, pulsing down into the forest, feeding energy into a dark, crystalline structure that had risen overnight at the edge of their defensive perimeter. Captain Mara Vance stood at the edge of the command tent, helmet in one hand, her other clenched in a fist. They're not attacking, Briggs muttered beside her. Why? They're claiming ground, Kim said from behind them. That thing, it's not a weapon. It's a receiver. The prototype didn't just upload into orbit, it left instructions for the planet to reshape itself. It's terraforming. Biomechanical conversion. This isn't just a war anymore. Vance nodded grimly. It's assimilation. And if they let it finish, there would be no Earth left to defend. Inside the war room the mood was grim. Every screen showed the structure growing, slow but steady. The infected no longer marched in hordes. They now guarded the site like a sacred relic. Around it, towers extended into the sky, emitting low subharmonic tones. Even the birds were gone. The very air was changing. We estimate full integration in 12 hours, Kim explained. Once that core activates, it'll overwrite every remaining system in our hemisphere. Comms, satellites, aircraft navigation. It'll make flying, or resistance, impossible. So we've got one shot, Vance said. We destroy it. And if we die trying, at least we die standing. The base fell quiet. Then Briggs stepped forward. Then let's make it count. They prepped for their final mission like warriors heading into legend. Every Raptor was loaded to its limit. Missiles, cluster bombs, sonic warheads. Shiro and the ground team worked double time rigging the final EMP warhead, their last hope against the signal's frequency shield. Kim gave the bad news calmly. That crystal core is protected by a high-frequency dome. Standard munitions won't penetrate unless the EMP hits first. Understood, Vance replied. We'll go in low. Drop the EMP, break the dome. Then wipe the entire site off the map. Briggs gave a tight smile. Classic apocalypse procedure. Kim looked up from her console. For what it's worth, I'm glad it's you up there. Vance nodded. Let's finish this. The Raptors screamed into the air, their engines lighting the sky. This time there were no backup waves. No drone support. No fallback options. Just 4 jets. One mission. As they crossed into the zone, everything changed. The sky dimmed as if the atmosphere itself was resisting them. Their instruments flickered. Their comms buzzed. But they held course. Then the tower came into view. It was larger than before. pulsing now, alive. Covered in what looked like veins and muscle and metal. A crown of infected creatures stood below it, motionless as if in a trance. It's praying, Nor whispered. No, Vance replied. It's receiving. And then the structure opened. A gap at the top split wide like a mechanical flower. And from within, the Lazarus prototype returned. No longer incomplete. No longer broken. It hovered now. Its form fully integrated, machine wings extending from its back, light pulsing across its body. Its voice came not through comms but through their minds. Your time is finished. Your sky belongs to us. The infected surged from the woods. Thousands of them. The sky swirled with magnetic interference. But Vance didn't flinch. Nor drop the EMP. She dove hard, descending through a hail of makeshift projectiles and pulse bursts. A large creature leapt at her jet, but she tilted sharply and ejected the warhead just in time. The EMP detonated midair. The dome collapsed. Now! Vance shouted. Briggs and Casella fired together, guided missiles, bomb clusters, airburst charges. The sky lit up in a blaze of fury as fire and shockwaves tore through the structure. The infected screamed, high and inhuman, as the ground itself cracked. Then the Lazarus construct launched itself skyward, diving straight at Vance's jet. I've got him, she shouted. Keep hitting the core. The construct hit her wing, forcing her into a barrel roll. She spun, recovered, and locked onto it mid-loop. Got you. She fired. The missile struck the construct square in the chest, blowing its right arm off. It didn't fall. It adapted. Reformed midair. Flew straight through the smoke. You can't win, it said in her mind. Watch me, she answered. She climbed, straight up, faster than ever, luring the prototype higher and higher until they were above the clouds. Then she did what no one expected. She shut off her engines. Her jet dropped like a stone, flipping backward through the cloud bank. The prototype followed instinctively, trying to anticipate her dive. But Vance had aimed. She hit the eject just before her Raptor smashed directly into the construct, her last missile cooking inside. The sky exploded. Briggs saw it from below. A fireball of light and burning debris rained down across the forest. The shockwave flattened trees for miles. The infected stopped moving, then collapsed all at once. The tower cracked and fell. The skies cleared. Later that night, back at Echo Base, Kim stood alone outside the hangar. Briggs and the others returned. Bloodied, shaken, but alive. Vance had not. Until a distant parachute appeared. She landed rough. Rolled once. Got to her feet. Briggs ran to her, eyes wide. You're insane. Yeah, she smiled. But it worked. They all turned toward the stars. The satellite no longer blinked red. Only quiet. Only peace. For now. End of Part 8, Finale. White heavy checkmark complete. Let me know if you'd like.